Good morning. A warm welcome to the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. We join together this morning in celebration of freedom. I am Richard Gown, President of the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and I'll provide a prologue for this convocation. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in a round warm of applause and welcome to the 7th Cavalry for their fine music this morning. Please. It is especially fitting that we gather on this, the campus of South Dakota and the High Plains Region's Technological University. For many years, nearly 2/3 of our graduates worked as engineers and scientists to apply their technological skills to develop the technologically advanced weapon systems that were a vital part of supporting the quest for freedom and peace that we celebrate this day. It is also fitting that we're in the home of the city of the nation's largest strategic bomber base, Ellsworth Air Force Base. The men and women of Ellsworth provided the planes and missiles that played a vital role in the years of struggle in the Cold War that made this day possible. Rapid City is also the home of the headquarters of the South Dakota National Guard, whose men and women brought their talents to serving the great needs of our nation and helped to bring the peace that we enjoy on this very special day. Underlying these major military efforts were the many men and women, the sons and daughters, the spouses, the brothers and sisters, the fathers, the mothers, who were called upon to serve their nation to maintain peace, in the hope that the day would come when the walls that separate the people of the world would be torn down. Many of those we love made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave their lives in the quest for peace. As we gather together this morning, it is vital that we are mindful of the almost uncalculable toll of human life given in the quest for freedom. This day we open a very special exhibition that will help us see what those who live behind the wall were forced to endure in their quest for freedom. This exhibition will help us complete our understanding of the over a half century of struggle between the forces of communist domination and the forces of freedom. To your left are the faces of the shrine of democracy that symbolize the determination of the peoples of the free world to enjoy and protect the independence that is essential for freedom. To your right stands a section of the Berlin Wall. Shortly, we shall remove the cover to display the wall that was constructed to deny millions their right to freedom. This morning's convocation inaugurates the exhibition, Breakthrough, the fight for freedom at the Berlin Wall. This morning, Dr. David Miller, a professor of history at the Black Hills State University and also at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, will help us recall the history of the Berlin Wall. We're also pleased this morning that Mayor Ed McLaughlin, Mayor of Rapid City, will lead in the unveiling of the wall. Representing the German community and the German Club of Rapid City, Helga Rourke will join Mayor McLaughlin in unveiling the wall. After we have unveiled the wall, it will be a privilege to call upon the curator of this exhibition, Dr. Helmut Trottau, who has traveled from Germany to be with us for this inauguration of this very special exhibition. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I ask that this historic convocation begin. The Ellsworth Air Force Base Color Guard will present the colors, and White Eagle, a truly gifted vocalist and representative of the Native American community, will sing our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise for the presentation of the colors and the singing of our national anthem.
Ein Count. Come back with me, if you will, for just a moment, to the world at the end of the Second World War. Because what I would like to do for the next minute or two is to give you a bit of insight into the American perspective on the coming of the Berlin Wall and our role in the Cold War. For Americans, the wall has become a symbol of our participation in and the sacrifices we made to win the Cold War. Almost half a century ago, in the final weeks of Franklin D. Roosevelt's life, spring 1945, we looked forward to a world without wars or walls. FDR's four policemen, the United States, the British, the Soviets, and the Chinese, will use a brand new world organization, the United Nations, to lead us forward into a world of peace and prosperity. When the time spring came again in 1946, however, the bright promise of the post-World War II era was vanishing rapidly. Cooperation between the two surviving post-war superpowers had all but ended. FDR was dead, replaced by a tough, no-nonsense new president named Harry S. Truman. Truman distrusted the Soviets. Part of Truman's distrust came from the fact that, to many Americans at least, it seemed as if the ugly old tyrant we had known from before World War II, Joseph Stalin, was back among us again. The atomic bombs dropped at the end of World War II raised the specter of mass destruction in a future war, far beyond anything ever seen on the planet. The Soviets had captured Germany's nuclear scientists, and soon they would have atomic bombs of their own. Mr. England, Winston S. Churchill, came to tell us that an iron curtain was being drawn across Europe. On one side lay freedom and democracy. On the other side were communism and tyranny. Always suspicious of being drawn into Europe's quarrels, America faced the unpleasant task of becoming the guardian of the free world. There was no other power to shoulder the task. As the conflict intensified in 1946 and 1947, George Kennan and others at the State Department hammered out what would come to be known as a containment policy. The spread of communism would be contained under United States leadership. The world would be spared the disaster of World War III, but the spread of communism would be stopped. Wherever it existed, freedom would be defended. Nowhere on earth would this task pose a greater challenge than in what was becoming known as West Berlin. In the bright springtime days of 1945, before the war's end, FDR had looked forward to a time when the Allies would cooperate in the creation of a democratic post-war Germany, free of the Nazi Party, free of tyranny. At the Yalta Conference, FDR, Churchill, had agreed to divide Germany into occupation zones, leaving Berlin 110 miles inside the occupation zone, which would be controlled by the Soviets. All powers would share control of the German capital. Each would have its occupation zone in the city, but Berliners, the occupying powers, would be free to come and go as they pleased throughout Berlin. By early 1948, the sunny days of the war's end were gone. The Iron Curtain and the Cold War left sections of Berlin controlled by the United States, the British, and the French isolated. West Berlin was an island inside the Soviet occupation zone, or East Germany, as the zone was becoming known. Berlin was becoming two cities. West Berlin, the U.S., British, and French zones began to recover from the terrible destruction of the war. Soviet Berlin, East Berlin, remained a ruin. Berliners and others in East Germany could move freely between the two parts of the city, seeing for themselves the contrast between the communist and the capitalist systems. Clearly, for the Soviets, West Berlin was an embarrassment and an annoyance. Somehow, West Berlin needed to be eliminated. The means to this end became the Berlin blockade. After a series of warnings, the Soviets closed all land and water access to West Berlin in June 1948. The city would have to feed itself. It couldn't survive for long. Americans and their friends would have to pack up and leave. The American military governor in West Germany, General Lucius Clay, warned President Truman, when Berlin falls, Western Germany will be next. What could be done? An attempt to force the opening of land routes to the city might trigger World War III, but containing the spread of communism demanded that the challenge somehow be met. The answer was mission impossible: the Berlin airlift. Flying into tiny airfields, U.S. and British planes fed a city of over 3 million people by air. Bad weather, Soviet harassment, shortages of aircraft and parts didn't matter. The supplies got through. 13,000 tons per day. Former enemies became friends as German Luftwaffe mechanics in World War II went to work on British and American planes, which had become their lifeline. By the time the Soviets reopened access to West Berlin in 1949, the city had become a symbol of the worldwide struggle between freedom and communism. The symbol continued through the 1950s, always a potential point for the next great crisis of the Cold War. West Berlin grew like a great phoenix from its own ashes to become a booming economic center. Year by year, East Berlin lagged further and further behind, more and more of an embarrassment for the communist system. East Germans used their access to West Berlin as a great highway for escape to the West. By the time John Kennedy became president in 1961, thousands were making the journey each month. The best and the brightest of East Germany were flowing west. If West Berlin could not be made to go away, perhaps a wall could be built around it. Free access to the West could end. Families, a city, centuries of tradition could be split in two. In the summer of 1961, work on the wall began. In every way, there would be two Berlins. East would be east. West would be west. The twain would not meet until the wall came down. And now at this point, ladies and gentlemen, let's pause for the unveiling of a section of the Berlin Wall. Assisting President Gowan will be Mayor Ed McLaughlin of Rapid City and Mrs. Helga Roerich, who was a resident of Berlin in the 1960s.
Germany flag detail. Up, put. Forward. Put. Thank you, Dr. Miller. We are privileged that Dr. Helmut Trottow has traveled from Germany to describe this unusual exhibition to freedom. Born in 1946, most of Dr. Trottow's life has been in a divided Germany. As a historian, educated in Germany and England, he brings a personal perspective of the struggle for freedom by the peoples of Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in providing a warm South Dakota welcome to Dr. Helmut Trottow. Dr. Trottow.
President, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, it's a very moving moment at the moment to see you all gathered here, showing that you are interested in our, may I say, common history, and that is post-war German history after 45. Exhibitions are somehow like little children. Once you have developed them, they develop their own life. This exhibition was originally intended just for the occasion of the first anniversary of the opening of the Berlin Wall in 1990. And of course for an American audience, but the response in this country has been so tremendous that it's now touring since that time, and as I've heard, it's going to tour for another almost a year. It goes to show, and I think it brought home to many Germans, the fact that this post-war German history has also been a very important part of the American history, and that's why you all feel so close and attentive about following events in our country. And I would like to use this opportunity of thanking everyone who helped bringing this exhibition over to the United States and especially to Rapid City. I'm sure all of you know where the Liberty Bell is to be found, this famous symbol of freedom in the United States. From a European point of view, America has always been the free new world. Everyone had her or his rights over here. At least that's how many Europeans saw it long back in the 17th, 18th and 19th century. And they fled either their country in Europe or they wanted to start a new life over here. During the 18th and 19th century, America became the land of hope and self-determination for the Europeans. And what about the 20th century, you may ask? Well, where did all those German Jewish citizens, for example, go when, after the Nazis came to power, had to flee my country in 1933? Many of them came to this country. And many, of course, did not make it, and they were doomed. But let me come back to the Liberty Bell. I'm not so sure that many of you may know that there's a copy of this bell from Philadelphia in Berlin, to be precise, on the tower of the famous Rathaus Schöneberg. And there's a little exhibition around this bell, and it's still being used. It was during and after the Berlin blockade in 1949 that American citizens began donations and collections to support the people of West Berlin in their fight against communist suppression. Hundreds, thousands of letters you can see in the exhibition room there showing this support. And the Rathaus Schöneberg has been the place of so many historic events in Berlin's post-war German history. The collection is shown in a room, as I said, underneath the tower. And whenever there is a major activity going on in Berlin, this bell is still rung and rang. And whenever that bell rang, the people of West Berlin knew and remembered that they were not alone in their struggle for freedom, and that they had powerful friends. Freedom and democracy are important values. No one knows that better than we in Berlin, where these values had been in serious danger for half a century. It was here, in the former capital, one should remember, of the Third Reich, that the communist world on the one hand and the free democratic societies and the American leadership on the other fought it out. The airlift was the beginning. The uprising in East Germany in 1953 was a following. And we should remember Hungary 1956 and Czechoslovakia 1968. Not to forget the Korean War that had effects in Berlin as well. Many a times the Cold War had been on the brink of getting very hot. The courage of the Berliners would not have been enough to succeed in this struggle. And it was this common fight which brought the former victorious powers of the Second World War and at least the West Germans together. From very recent studies we know that US military forces at the beginning, right after 1945, had doubts about the willingness of the Germans to follow a democratic path. But General Clay, for example, has confirmed on more than one occasion that it was during the Berlin blockade that the attitude of the Berliners persuaded him that the Germans had enough of dictatorship and wanted freedom and democracy. Until the erection of the border, which later became to be known as the Berlin Wall, millions of people had tried to escape to West Berlin. Many were successful. Some, I'm afraid, were not. Whether we ever will find out how many people actually got killed trying to run the border, I'm doubtful to say. Simply, one of the explanations I found during my own research, because many cases were never reported as the escapers didn't even reach the border area. One should not forget that large areas of East Berlin had been declared no-go areas, and you had to have a special entrance visa to get into these border areas, even if you wanted to visit your own parents, your children, brothers or sisters. Especially young people did not cope with the perspective of their life with a wall and committed suicide. Today, if you walk around in the center of Berlin, you'll find it very, very hard to find any of the traces of this tragic past. The redevelopment and the growing together of things that originally belonged together is going at a very rapid pace, despite all the problems. And watching the public debates that are going on, I sometimes have the feeling whether we really take everything in that happened since 1989. After all, it's only 4 years. Freedom and democracy are not given values. We have to work for them and fight for them every day. even today, even after the fall of the wall. Democracy may not be the best of all systems, but, as Winston Churchill once put it, there is no better one. As a historian, you often get the question, why worry about the past? It is gone. We cannot bring it back or relive it. True. But we should not forget that all of us carry parts of that past within us. The past is always with us, whether we like it or not. A famous historian once said, "The study of history does not make us more clever for a second time." There is no second time in history. But it makes us wiser all round. And the current president of Germany, Richard von Weizsäcker, said in his famous speech on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of World War II, "If we don't know where we come from, we don't know who we really are. And then it's going to be very difficult to decide where we want to go in the future." Today, the entire political globe is at a crossroads. Where do we want to go in the future, and what can we learn from our recent past? Both Germany as well as America are facing tremendous challenges on a national as well as an international level. Would it not be good to remember that it was our cooperation and compromise that succeeded in overcoming the communist challenge? In Germany, many people are so much occupied at the moment with their internal difficulties that they forget looking over the rim of their teacup. The German Historical Museum developed this exhibition on the history of the Berlin Wall to say thank you to the American people for their support for almost half a century. As I said earlier on, we never expected this show to be as successful as this. But it has driven home to many people in Germany the thought that for many Americans, the fight for freedom in Berlin was part of their own history. So it was this common fight that brought us together and especially gave the people of West Germany the chance of being reintegrated into the Western world. And this again was a very important presupposition for German unification, which we experienced 4 years ago. As long as the division of the German nation prevailed, we could only be junior partners, quite rightly. But now, after unification, this role is no longer possible. But it will take some time to adjust to these changes. The Soviet Union has gone, and in a year's time, all the Allied forces in Berlin, the Russians included, will have left the city. How are we going to remember those past 50 years? Why should we remember them, and how? Well, as far as Berlin is concerned, there are 3 major projects in the making. A memorial on the history of the Berlin Wall, and the results of our preliminary work you can see in this exhibition. A museum on the history of German and Soviet relations, which is going to be in that building where in May 1945 the German Wehrmacht signed the capitulation treaty and thereby ending the Second World War in Europe. And finally, there will be a museum commemorating the presence of the Western Allies in Germany, and especially in Berlin. Before I stop, a few words on the exhibition itself. It comprises three parts: a photo documentary showing pictures on the history of that brutal border. The term wall is somewhat a euphemism. In fact, there were 2 walls, one facing the west, one facing east, and in between was a death strip with all sorts of border fortifications. And therefore, the image of this border as a wall is simply not describing the situation how it used to be and what this border really meant. Secondly, we incorporated objects that were being used in actual escape attempts. They vividly illustrate to what people were prepared to do and to go and to risk to escape the communist regime, the longing for freedom. Some were successful. Some of these objects didn't work. Some of these objects even had their funny connotations. For example, that little car you are going to see in the opening of the area of the exhibition. One, today at least, one cannot possibly envisage that you could have smuggled a person out in that car. And that's what the border guards of East Germany thought too, therefore they didn't worry about it. And the reason why it came out was, while this little car was standing at the crossing point, the woman inside, hidden inside, moved. So the whole car moved. And that's what made the border guard become aware of there's something strange going on, and that's why they dismantled the whole car and then found out from then on this device was no longer possible. Or there is another little caption on a picture, on a transparent picture of the wall, and when you come in you see it the wrong way round. No, it isn't the wrong way round. It is the right way round, but somebody very ingeniously had written the wrong way round, trying to say that only once the walls get transparent you can see the real meaning of what his caption meant. Look at the funny side of life. And the third part of the exhibition is a video bringing together film clips of actual escape attempts with quotations from various American representatives visiting Berlin. It is above all those quotations which prove beyond any doubt that from the very beginning every leading American politician was convinced that in Berlin there was more at stake than the people of that city. It was at the Rathaus Schöneberg, where the copy of the Liberty Bell still chimes, that John F. Kennedy uttered these famous words, "Freedom is indivisible, and when one man is enslaved, all are not free. All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin, and therefore, as a free man, I take great pride to say, ich bin ein Berliner." Thank you very much for the attention and for coming.